Awesome. And so thank you again all for being here at our individual giving and storytelling workshop. I'm going to go ahead and dive right into it. So this is something that we talked about a little bit when everybody was sharing about the emotions that come up when you think about one-on-one fundraising. And one of the big emotions that was shared is it can be scary. Right? It can, a lot of us experience fear or anxiety when it comes to asking for money or support. And so, where do these emotions come from? A lot of it is the fear of the no, right? We all have an intrinsic fear of getting a rejection, of having a no. Also, asking for money is an act of vulnerability. We are not raised in a healthy way around talking about class, around talking about money, especially if you were raised within white supremacy as the culture, white centrality as the culture. You know that there's kind of a hush about talking for money. And so asking for money is an act of vulnerability. Also, individual fundraising often involves asking friends and family, especially early on. So when you're getting going, it can be really challenging because there's that extra level of vulnerability happening, right? Not only are you asking somebody for money, but oftentimes it's not a stranger when, especially you're trying to do some of these bigger asks early on to get some of those large donors in the door. Um, and so like another thing is like, why is that all kind of scary? Is we are taught that fundraising is a one-sided exchange, that it is only us getting money from them. We're not providing any value back. And so I just want to try and flip that script with us a little bit, right? So one-on-one fundraising can be exciting. And so what does it look like when you flip the typical emotions around asking for money on their head? Instead of scary, it can be exciting because you get to personally connect supporters to your project and cause, right? This is not just kind of a one and done kind of thing. Like you're building a relationship. You're really wanting to get them excited and interested in your project. And oftentimes the support that they can give you will go beyond just money and financial support. You are also helping others have an authentic impact in the world. Not everybody has the time or talents or opportunities to be able to work on projects like these. And so again, they're getting this opportunity to really invest in something that's having an amazing impact in the world, that's bringing about change or bringing about joy or bringing about poetry. It's creating beauty in the world. It's having a real difference in different people's lives. And so, again, this isn't really a one way exchange. They're giving you money, but you're giving them the ability to have an impact and to feel like they're doing good in the world. And so another thing is each donation is a relationship that can be grown over time. And so just like getting to connect those supporters to your project and cause over time, you're going to be able to deepen that relationship. That means, yes, more potential money down the line, but more importantly, it means maybe getting introduced to other people who have even more resources than that one person. It might mean getting introduced to a vital community partner who's going to be able to give you in kind donations or in kind resources. And so, really, the more you can think about one on one fundraising, and we'll get more into this later about it being relationship building and relationally based, it's going to be better for you. And also, what's more exciting than shooting past your personal fundraising goals, right? I know for me, like if you go in and your goal is to raise $5,000 by asking 10 people, and then you end up with like $20,000 instead, it's a great feeling. And yeah, it can be a little scary that like, oh, what if you don't get the money? But if you don't ask, if you don't do any one-on-one fundraising, then you are not going to ever have that money in the first place. So that's just a little bit about like flipping that mindset of it's scary. Oh my gosh, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to ask for money. To like, no, this is exciting. One other resource I really recommend is there's a good TED talk by artist Amanda Palmer called The Art of Asking. And especially for artists, it's a really great TED talk about why art is really an important part of society, and that when you're producing art and giving art to other people, you know, it is an important thing that you're contributing to their lives. And that, again, it's not a one way transaction for them to give you money. Like you are giving them something that's really beneficial to them as well. And so, one thing that's really important, like, why should you flip that script right now? Like, why focus on individual funders? And so, I think that we were talking about this a little bit early on with some of the discussions around where people are with their emotions around fundraising, why they feel like individual fundraising is important right now. And a lot of it ties into currently we have a scary federal situation around grants, a lot of grants getting defunded, a lot of types of projects getting attacked within the funding ecosystem. And so that means that that pool of funding around grants is going to be smaller and smaller for the time being, with a lot more people trying to fight for that same pool of money. That unfortunately is also true of corporate sponsorships right now. Sponsors are corporations and big sponsors are pulling back kind of across the board. And that even goes to big liquor companies are pulling back from their kind of local level sponsorships of events. Working here in New Orleans, we had a couple of big festivals decide not to go this year because they've had so many sponsors pull back. And these are like, mainstream food festivals. This is not, unique cultural festivals or, LGBTQ focused festivals. These were just, bagel festivals that are having these impacts from corporate sponsorships. And I know that other organizations that are more culturally specific or more artistic based, they're having even bigger problems with sponsorships. So because those pools of funding are getting smaller and smaller and harder to access, it's going to make doing individual fundraising and really honing your individual donors all that much more important going forward, at least for the next few years. Any questions about that? Because I know this is something that I think is on a lot of people's minds right now. And so I just want to open it up for a moment in case anybody has any questions specifically about the kind of current funding situation overall. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move us on. So we're going to do a initial activity. So I want us to do a quick pair and share, all right? And this is going to be a fast activity. So I want each of you to, we're going to pair up into small groups through the breakout rooms. And I would like you to share one experience, just one, of a one-on-one fundraising where it worked or it didn't work. And it can be either you asking somebody for money or it can be somebody asking you for money. And so I want you to share that with the other person, and then I want them to just reflect it back really quick, and then you all just swap, and then we're going to come back into a large group and share together about what some of those reflections and insights we got from those shares are. Any questions on that before I break us up into those breakout rooms? I believe one group is going to have a group of 3. And so that group, if you all could just try to be conscious of time as much as possible, so that way everybody has a good chance to share. That would be wonderful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up this room. So, sorry, for time wise, let's try to keep each share at about 2 minutes. So it'll be 2 minutes, like do a quick 30-second response and then swap in 2 minutes and a quick response. So I'll be bringing y'all back in about 5 minutes, and I'll put out little messages through the chat that will let you know when we're about to hit those times. All right, those rooms are now open. All right. Brika, do you want us to pause during these breakout rooms? I can pause the recording. Just so
Yes.
it'll be easier to edit later. All right, welcome back, y'all. I am excited to hear what you all shared in your pairs. So, who wants to share first? But we'll just take one person from each pair or trio.
I'll do it. Tala, is that cool with you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So it was the two of us. Um, I talked a little bit about how when we attempted our one attempt was using MailChimp, and I added like every single professional and personal contact I have in the universe onto it. And we buried the ask kind of low down. It was quite long. And the people who ended up giving us money were sort of the handful of people who already know us and know our work. And so that was kind of a miss. And so moving forward, and then my collaborator who knows a lot more people who actually have money. Most of my people are like more penniless artist types, or whatever. She's been really reluctant. And so I think what we need to learn how to do is really individualize the ask, and get her also more comfortable in doing that, but not do this like mass mailer where people feel like I don't have to respond. And then and Tala, that they have an interesting situation where their dance studio has changed its organizational structure to be more horizontal and inclusive, and trying to raise funds to make sure that for broader access. But again, on their contact list, there's only a certain number of people who are engaged. And so we were sort of puzzling through, maybe the first step for her would be for them to do some kind of like a survey, like an informational outreach, but with like a survey. What do you think of our transition? And then to at least get people to see who is engaged, and then they'd have a better idea of who to pitch. No, and that's what. But we thought it'd be interesting to hear what you had to say about that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to discuss that maybe a little bit more towards the end of the workshop. But one thing I do want to lift up was like a key part was engagement, right? And there was like that bit of putting the ask a little bit too far down the email, and maybe even how email itself can be a bit of an impersonal way of reaching out. Great. So, who would like to share next for their pair or trio?
I can go. I am so sorry. I'm gonna butcher your name, Wawija. But they and I spoke, one about collaborating together, so it was a really good pair to have. But they in particular didn't realize how much they'd raised in the past for personal needs and other things, and because their face isn't on this project, like they're not the beneficiary of the benefactor of the funding coming in. It's a more of a collective now. It's more people. I mentioned, hey, you still have that voice. You still are able to tell your story. And if you collected all this money from people that already like you, why not keep that going? Like, why not just keep like leveraging that more? And so I think that there's lots of opportunities for people that have raised funds on their own for other projects, other things that are going on that might be embarking on something new, to actually come back and leverage those contacts that they already have. And that's something that I personally have had a problem with trying to grasp, is just kind of putting it off and putting it off when this is like at the forefront, and I just need to like get out there and ask. And I've been doing it more recently, but especially now that I'm an IM affiliate. But it's just something you always struggle with asking for money. It's just, hey, how do you do it? It's way easier for me to ask somebody that works for a corporation and hear a no from them than it is from one of my friends that says no. And so I didn't mention this in our meeting, but whenever I am doing fundraising for this project or other projects, I blast it out there on social media. I reach out to people directly. Some people donate, some people don't, but I don't ask them directly to donate, and that might be the problem why I'm not getting so many donations, but I'm asking for them to give me introductions to somebody else. Like, who can you actually talk to for me that might be interested in this if you're not at the capacity to actually donate yourself? So that's just kind of where I'm at, where they're at, and yeah.
Love that. Yeah. And I just want to lift up, going back and asking the same folks to donate again is an important thing that you're going to want to get used to. But you always want to be aware, like, hey, you should know your donor well enough to know if they're interested in what you're asking them for money for, right? Don't go and ask them for money for every cause you're ever fundraising for, because I think that's a really good way to get donor fatigue. I think you should ask, like, but you should know those donors who you're doing that kind of personal engagement with well enough that you're like, okay, great. I know that they were really into this like arts project I just did. Like they're going to be really into this other one, right? Yeah, and absolutely keep going back to those folks again with donor fatigue always in mind. Which of the pairs trios has not shared yet?
We didn't share yet, and that's what we found as well, that when I had an experience with an organization that I was working for last year, that I could go directly to a donor who had probably annually given us money for projects. He was willing to do it again, just in with a personal email from me, and so that was really satisfying. But we all agreed in my group that it's trickier to ask for money for your own personal project, especially feeling uncomfortable doing it with what you mentioned at the beginning, with asking friends and family for support.
What feels like
And
the biggest barrier in that?
what feels like, I don't know. I think it's mostly ego for me anyway. Like um a discomfort around knowing that someone could offer support. Like they have the wherewithal to offer support, but it's probably just a discomfort. I think you mentioned it in the first slide, that we don't have a culture of this. And
Yeah,
so
so
how do
that vulnerability.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I will talk about some strategies to overcome that in a little bit. Also, before we move on, does anybody else want to share something from their pairs trios that they feel like wasn't lifted up in our conversation yet? Awesome. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And I just want to say welcome to Rick and Kendall. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. And if you want to share in the chat your name, pronouns, the organization or project that you're working with through IAM, and then one emotion that surfaces when you think about one-on-one fundraising.
Cause I can get hurt at hand.
Right.
I mean, I can get. I don't know. I feel.
So we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna do some content and some kind of talking at y'all before we get into a little bit more activities. And so growing your donors, I really think about donors as like an orchard, really, not even like a perennial plant. Like it's a garden that's long term. You're investing in it year after year after year. It takes time and energy. You've got to fertilize it. You got to prune it. All of those things, right? And so I feel like there's a lot of really investment that you have to put in order to have your donors grow over time, right? And that's both acquiring new donors as well as taking those donors who've already given and kind of leveling up their relationship year after year. And so the secret sauce of individual fundraising, as we talked about a little bit before, it's all about relationship. It's all about that connection that you are bringing to that person, to your project, and bridging those two together. So it's both the relationship to the project cause as well as to you as the fundraiser, because no matter how much you don't want to be it, you are the avatar for your project. You are the avatar, the champion for your for your organization, right? Nobody else is going to do that. And when people think about your project, they're going to think about you. And so you're always going to be a key part of this relationship to individual donors. And, that's a little bit scary, but also I think once you realize that that's true for everybody, it does take away some of the scariness maybe of asking friends and family who you already have those kinds of, personal relationships with. And so I think about three different pieces that are really key, at least for my own personal approach to individual giving. And so impact, integrity, and engagement. And I kind of view those as like the three kind of fundamental fertilizers that come together and help your donors give more over time. Impact is really telling your donor how that money is being used. How is it changing people's lives in the world, right? So when I say how is it being used, it's not like, oh, we bought 10 pencils, or we bought, we rented a venue, or we, paid an artist. It's like, tell us, what did that artist do with that money? Or how did that change that artist's lives? What did the performance piece that was at the venue accomplish? How did that impact people? Um, how did the supplies that were raised, how did that, again, change like the child's lives who receives them? It's not about the what so much as the what. It's not so much as the what is coming from those dollars directly as like the impact that those dollars are having in the long run. And we'll talk a little bit more about impact in terms of storytelling in a little bit. Integrity, right? It's so important to have integrity with your donors. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. And that's all about growing that trust. And obviously, like, no relationship works without trust, right? And then engagement is, you gotta keep coming back to your donors year after year. You gotta engage them even beyond just asking them for money. And that's really, really important as you're doing this work. Like, don't just engage your big donors or even your medium donors or even really your small donors just when you're asking them for money. So many people make this problem or make this mistake, and it becomes a problem in the long run, right? And it just undermines people's feeling of trust in you and the relationship as a whole, right? Nobody likes a friendship where it's only that person coming to you and asking you for something over and over and over again, and it doesn't feel like there's ever that return. And right, we were talking about it being transactional, it's relational, like it is going both ways. And so that means you, as an artist, as a creator, as an organizer, you have to be investing back into that donor and making sure that they understand what they're getting out of it. So the science of stories, you know, I find storytelling is useful for all types of communication and fundraising. I think communications and fundraising go hand in hand, right? But I think especially for individual fundraising, people don't think about it as often, but you're one-on-one with people. It's a great time to tell a story. It's a really great time to use stories to engage people and to draw them into your work. And storytelling is our oldest form of passing knowledge. It's probably how we originally passed knowledge generationally. It's how we passed skills. It's how we told each other not to eat that poisonous plant. So storytelling, it's actually hardwired into our brains. And people see when they do like MRIs and CAT scans of brains and all of that, they see parts of the brain light up differently and light up more for stories than for just straight facts. And stories hold a place of importance throughout all cultures, all times. This is not just one place on the world. It is a commonality across all of human societies. Uh, and studies have also shown that people grasp and retain information way more easily when in story form. So it also is easier for people to remember and kind of recall exactly the details and again, just connect to it. Because really that's the key part about stories, the key power of stories is they have the power to create empathy and human connection in a way that nothing else does. And so stories can both like woo new donors, but they can also win over detractors. They're a really powerful form of communication. And so, how does storytelling play into individual fundraising? So, anytime you are fundraising, I would say, again, like I was saying, approach it from a storytelling angle. It's always going to help people connect and remember. And so, you can work this into your crowdfunding campaigns. You can work this absolutely into your grants. You can definitely work it into your social media, right? Like, there's so many ways you can work storytelling in. And so, what does storytelling really mean in that regard? It's think about that, you're not just laying out facts, right? You're actually telling a story. You're bringing somebody into the space or the reality that happened rather than just XYZ occurred. And when you're doing those stories, you want to remember that impact angle. So you want to have emotional connection, and the story overall should be about telling the impact that your work had on somebody or something, right? So really, storytelling is always useful across all fundraising. You should always be looking at whatever fundraising campaigns you're doing and asking, is there a storytelling aspect woven into it? Some of those foundations of story to characters, right? So who are the characters that are part of this story? Probably your organization and the people that you serve, your artwork and the audience members. But it could be your artwork and the community it's impacting, right? So who are the kind of fundamental characters of your story that you're trying to tell? What's the conflict? What is trying to be overcome, right? And so is your artwork addressing white supremacy, your poetry addressing white supremacy, right? And how is it doing that? And then setting, right? You always want to make sure what is the actual extent of the setting. So is this national impact? Is it local and very specific? Who is, again, what's kind of geographical range, but also setting can also be time range, and it can also be a little bit more nuanced in terms of specific locations in multiple settings, right? So maybe you're doing this work in churches around and you're seeing, again, sharing stories in different churches. There's a lot of different ways that these different story elements can play out in terms of storytelling within fundraising overall. And whenever you have conflict, right, you also want to focus on resolution. And so your idea is to present the story, and then the resolution is your project and the work that you're doing. And so, your team, your project, you all are the protagonists, and you're going to be recruiting the donor to your side that's doing right and going to win. And so you're really telling the story of being these champions for your work, for the arts, for whatever kind of change you're trying to create in the world. And you're inviting the donor to be a part of that story. And don't be afraid while you're doing that to talk about your long-term vision. I would say start with a grounded story and then move outward from there. I think that's always the best way to work, rather than trying to start abstract and then move into a specific. And so I think it's great to start with a very specific story. And then at the end, when you're with that individual donor, make sure you talk about that long-term vision too. Because I think that that's going to give that kind of fuller range of the work that you want to create. All right, so we talked about storytelling and how it plays into individual fundraising. So what are some of those tools where storytelling might come into play? And these are the tools that I really recommend you have these before you start doing one-on-one fundraising, right? So your too long didn't read pitch. Think of it as your elevator pitch. It's the most condensed version of what you're doing and why it's important. That why it's important is so key. And so in some ways it should almost be, 25% what you're doing and 75% why it's important. Obviously, like when you're writing it out, don't take that as a exact formula, but maybe just like as a guiding rule, because words are going to work out differently every time somebody's trying to craft one of these. The most important thing, right, is that again it conveys that why in a really impactful manner. And you should also be able to remember it and speak it with ease. Don't make it overly long or complicated. Don't make it hard to get out. That's also going to make it easier for people to understand it. And then once you have this elevator pitch, this is actually core language that you can use all over the place, right? You can use that on your website. You can use that in social media. You can use that in your grants. That elevator pitch should be a really core piece of your work. And so use that as a key message. Put in the work to craft it to the point where you feel like you can stand behind that and stand behind it in all of your fundraising. And again, that's part of that is about building out that integrity. You have to assume that the big donors that you're approaching, they're going to be looking at your website and they're going to be looking at your social media and they're going to be following your work. So just making sure that your messaging is consistent across all of your fundraising is always a really fantastic thing to do. So you have your elevator pitch or your TLDR pitch, and next you're going to develop a one pager. And I will say sometimes people find it easier to develop the one pager first and then narrow it down to an elevator pitch. So, work from whatever feels best for you. I know I like to work with the elevator pitch, and then I'm like, okay, great. I know exactly the core of the work. I can kind of expand it into the one pager. But the one pager, think of it as a double sided, right? And front to back. And it's going to have both visual and informational aspects to it. You definitely don't want to have it be all just like dense words on both sides. Pictures, right, worth 1,000 words, all of that. And also, as especially creators, artists, I think it's even more important to have visuals in your fundraising documents because your supporters are going to be looking for that evidence, right? They're going to be wanting to understand that in some way. uh, have your very first paragraph focus on your impact and really hook the reader. I try to, where I can, have that first paragraph be a story that really demonstrates impact and then kind of leads into, these are the main impacts we have as an organization as a bullet point, even. And then you can start, again, using visuals, headings, bullet points to make it really easy to read. Always include calls to action. I like to include a call to action at the bottom of both sides, just in case somebody doesn't turn it around. Calls to actions include, visit this website to find more. It can be donate at this, URL, all of that. So just make sure it's really clear, and just, always, 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 always include your call to action in any fundraising, and always make sure it is, very visually evident. And so think about that, what that means, like in an email, that really means putting it at the very top of the email. When you have like a print sheet, you have a little bit more variability in terms of how you do that call to action, right? And so I like to put mine at the bottom of the sheet. Maybe you do, a big block on the right hand side. I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach it visually, but just make sure your call to actions are really evident, really clear. I'm seeing some questions in the chat. Okay, I don't think there's actually questions. Great. Fantastic. And then, okay, so you got your pitch and you've got your one pager, and make sure you have some kind of website. I know it's annoying to have to do a website, and maybe it is just social media. Maybe you just have an Instagram. I think for artists, especially for artists and arts organizations, that as you're getting going, an Instagram can be a great, easy way to build out an online presence. But it's pretty easy to do a simple Squarespace or WordPress page or things like that. There's a lot of ways to do free websites these days that are pretty simple and kind of use what you see is what you get builders. And so I do think it's really worth having some kind of simple website, having your own URL. It's only, I think, $20 a year. And so having that, it just adds legitimacy to the organization. Great. So let's talk about honing your pitch. So tips for your elevator pitch, right? So if you really want this to be 1 to 3 sentences, and again, no run-on sentences, nothing that feels like it keeps going or overly complicated or has a complex sentence structure. Stay away from listing out all of the what's of your project, where you really want to focus in on the impact. How is it changing people's lives, the culture, communities, all of that. Also, center, why is the project needed? What makes it unique? Why is it needed now? Urgency is going to be so important in the coming years around art. It's unfortunate, but it's going to be true. And so I would say, especially in the coming years, talking about urgency for your arts projects and cultural projects is going to be really something you should center in all of your communications. And how will your work make a bigger splash than other similar projects, if there are similar projects? Always, so think of this as like your unique value proposition would be the businessy way of putting it. But it's just talking about like, why does your project matter more than other projects at its core? Why should people care about your project more than other things that they want to, that are also asking them for money? And your pitch is going to evolve. So like you're going to develop that core language. And I really recommend trying it out with friends, trying it out with partners and collaborators, and really getting a lot of feedback. And then also after you've done your first round of one-on-one asks, get more feedback. See what was working, what did people respond most to? What did people not respond to at all? And so just as you're working with it, really note how different people either do or don't engage with that pitch, because it is such a core messaging for your project and your work. So that was a lot of talking at you. I want us get us all talking together again. So I want us to do a quick elevator pitch practice activity. And so we're going to take 3-4 minutes to do a quick bit of drafting together here. And I want you all to do a quick, 1 to 3 sentence elevator pitch of one project or organization that you're working on actively. So it could be the ones that you shared earlier, whatever feels most pressing in terms of one-on-one fundraising. So we're gonna take like 4, maybe 5 minutes to craft that. Then we're gonna break up into pairs and trios, and we're gonna take turns sharing the pitch and getting feedback about the pitch. And then we'll come back for a large group share back. Any questions on that before I start our timer for starting to write those elevator pitches? All right. I'm gonna put on some music without lyrics. So we have something to listen to while everybody works. I'm on mute. Hi, sorry, welcome back, y'all. Did everybody have a chance to share even just a little bit? Great. I would love to hear what was working really well for folks. So let's try to again make these shares fairly quick. And that doesn't have to be super fast, but anybody would like to share what one of the folks in their group shared that went really well for the pitch?
I I'll go first. So I got in there with yeah, yeah, because it was just Mr. Aaron, and it was really touching, to be honest. Very touching, to be honest. I think that it was funny because he said that he liked my pitch better than what I said when I first got in the room, and I was thinking I don't even remember what I even said, to be honest. That's why he was talking about it. Like while he was talking, I was like, but then I had to write it down. I couldn't really write it down, so he was like telling me so just remembering that, just me being more confident in myself, and and that's something that I'm working on more. Even though I do, people like, oh, you're very confident. Sometimes I don't. I guess imposter syndrome. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and sometimes it works better, if you work more from like a spoken word space, to just even record yourself talking about it, have a friend record yourself talking about it, and you can go back and kind of make your written notes from there. Awesome. Who else would like to share about what was really working for them with the pitches?
I'll go. We had Kathy Doubleus had to jump off, but we thought hers was beautiful. And she herself was saying like the language that she uses is kind of academic because she's a professor, and that might be one thing that she needs to try to like figure out how to weave her academic self and her more authentic, like normal language speaking person together. But it was very evocative. And the one thing that we suggested is that she add a little sentence about that to really emphasize why this work is so important today. Um, and then Kendall had a really succinct one about Richmond Renaissance that because it was like it was short and but immediately engaged us in wanting to know more about this project. But it was very well framed, you know, because it started out with sort of um, all the disinvestment and kind of the racism that has impacted downtown Richmond and what their work is, how it's going to fill that gap with this arts district that involves youth. So those were in both of theirs things that we thought were powerful.
That's great. I love that. And you know, this is not where you want to start necessarily with multiple versions of an elevator pitch, but at one point you may find yourself developing different versions of your pitches in order to meet different audiences. And so one thing I would say is to have Kathy even record that more academic version, have it as one that maybe, you know, she can break out in more academic circles and all of that, and then try to have another one that's for everybody else who might not be you know, as accessing of those terms. Great. What other pair would like to share next?
Well, if I could just jump in here real quick. Mr. Breckenridge and I had a great conversation, and I actually teach some pitch classes and workshops and things with entrepreneurs specifically, which artists are the most disadvantaged entrepreneurs, even though you don't consider yourself entrepreneurs. But one of the things that the reason why I thought that his intro was better than his pitch is because his pitch was written down, it was rehearsed, it was something that he was just reading verbatim. And so it felt a little just I don't even know, like cut and dry. Whereas when you're talking kind of freely, and you're adapting your pitch, I call it a spiel, to who your audience is, it should at least feel natural to the other person. So you're talking to the other person and making sure that they're feeling welcome to come in and be invited into your circle. You're providing them with information that you think that they should know and not just reading off of a script. And so that's why I thought that the intro for Mr. Breckenridge was like way better than his two or three sentences, which were still good. It still got the point across, but it didn't appeal to my emotions as much, which is why I was like, I'm so glad that we're connected together in this particular breakout room because we're like I want to meet you after your introduction. But after the pitch, I would have been if he would have said that to me on the street, I would have probably just been like, okay, cool, next person, the kind of thing. So it's all about that emotional appeal, at least to me, of how you can relate to the person that you're talking to, and pick up if you could tell when you're getting bored by somebody else's, like by if somebody else is getting bored by you talking to them. So pick up on those types of cues, is like what's really important. And not to discount the words that he was using during the pitch that he put together for this, but there was way more emotion, way more um a lot more adjectives that sparked emotion in his intro than in the pitch itself. So I just wanted to throw that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that at no point should you ever be reading these pitches to donors off a script at all, right? Like the goal is for you to, you know, kind of internalize this enough to where it becomes that spiel that you're talking about, where you can kind of organically riff on it, but you have that core language, those core messages that you were always hitting on. Great. Anybody else from one of the other pairs who wants to share before we move on to their final bit of content? All right. So I want to give you all just a few tips on how to make the ask, right? Once you have identified your initial people that you want to do your outreach to, right? You create your spreadsheet of potential donors. It's time to go ahead and try and make that ask. And so I find that it's always best to ask for it in person. Now, this might not be possible if it's not in person. Zoom is also workable, but just like Aaron was just sharing, like you want to have this be an emotional connection, and it's all about that relationship, right? And so it's always going to be better to be able to have that kind of connection in person. Zoom again is an alternative, but basically being able to see each other's faces, faces build trust, eyes build trust, and so I think that it's really the best way that you're going to have success. After that, if you can't get somebody on a Zoom or in person, you might have certain family members who just don't do those things. Absolutely, a phone call is totally fine. Maybe it's a friend who you haven't seen in a long time, and like a Zoom or in person feels a little weird, and like in person they're too far away. Again, the phone call might be appropriate. It's all about trying to work with what's going to give you the most intimate connection. Uh, Text messages can work as part of a campaign, such as a crowdfunding campaign, but I would not do text messages at all to ask for money from large donors or to try to initiate one-on-one. I mean, again, maybe you have a friend who only responds to texts. We do have those people. And so know your friends. You can use text in those cases, but in general, try to again work from the most personal down the way through. Social media messages being the absolute last resort as being the absolute most impersonal. Tips for making the ask: let the person know that you want to ask them for a donation, right? This is the way that you can break the ice. So before you meet with them in person, you say, hey, can we meet in person? I was wondering, do you have time so I could to meet with me so you could share, so I could share about my project and ask you for support, right? And so just a quick, simple line about like, hey, I want to get together with you to ask you for support. It lets them know what you're going to be doing. It takes the tension out of it, so it's not like a surprise attack. You don't make them feel uncomfortable, right? Like when we were talking about friends and family, asking them, this is a really great way to defuse that. And it gives them an out. Like maybe they can't donate right now, and so they can just like be like, no, sorry, not now is not the time. So it really helps take some of that tension out. If you're doing a phone, Aaron, I'll do questions and answers at the end of this, and then just because we have only a couple minutes left. By phone, it's, if you want to, if you're having that initiation, I want to catch up. And I'd also love to share about the organization that I'm raising funds for. Do you have time for that? So again, just making it really extra clear. Bring your one pager and any other supporting materials so you can share them in person, right? Or have them ready to share digitally by Zoom, or email them ahead of time before that Zoom meeting. But you really want to make sure that you're able to share those. They can also be emailed at the end of a phone call. After sharing about the project or your organization, make a direct ask with a specific dollar amount. And this is so key. It's really, especially going into a large donor ask, you're going to have some sense of what they're given in the past, what they're able to give. Like you're either going to know them personally, or you're going to have done a little bit of research about that. And so it's great to, like, you really want to go in with a specific ask, because you'll be surprised. You're going to get so much better results that way. And oftentimes think about what you would normally ask, what feels comfortable, and then ask like just the next little bit above it. Not like, oh, I think they can afford 500. Someone asked 5,000. Like, oh, I think they can afford 500. Someone asked like 750 or something like that. Just like nudge yourself up, because we always think that people are going to give a little bit less, and you will be surprised very pleasantly to have people give more than what you expect. And then always follow up after the ask. This is so key. So, at the end of that ask, you want to ask if they know anybody else who'd be interested in supporting the project or org. In some ways, this is the most important part of your actual one-on-one conversation, because even if you get a no, as long as you've sold that person on your project and your organization, they might still be able to connect you with other high worth individuals. And especially in your friends and family stage, this is so key because you may not know that many wealthy people, but you probably have at least one friends or a couple of friends and family who do, who are able to connect you to those high worth individuals. So just after you make your ask, after they say yes or no, even if it's a no, always ask if they know anybody else who'd be interested in supporting your project. And then always thank them for the time, no matter what the outcome is, right? Like, doesn't matter if they said no. Obviously, you know, if they spit in your face, you don't have to thank them, but that's not going to be the case. That's never been the case. And so always thank them. Like, it's always going to be a wonderful interaction. I've never had one of these meetings where it felt negative in the end, ever, in my entire time in doing fundraising for 2 decades. And so really approaching it from gratitude is always the way to go. If the person has pledged a donation, ask them for the best way to follow up and how to receive that donation. Because especially when you're working with high worth individuals, that follow up, it means that you're going to be professional with it, and they might have donor advised funds that they're sending it through. They might have very specific ways that they have to give you that money. About a day after the meeting, follow up with a thank you note. Again, no matter what the outcome was, just thank them for their time again, and track everything. Whether it's in a spreadsheet or a CRM, a constituent relationship management system, track your potential donors, who you ask, and the results, because that's going to really help you build out your whole individual giving system over time. Awesome. And so we were going to do an activity. We do not have time, and it is at the end of our time